Good evening, everyone, and welcome back to my channel. It's been a hot minute. I've been doing a lot of prep work and a lot of working overtime to afford these last two Colorado trips that I recently went on. And today I wanted to kind of go over my 2025 pronghorn hunt and tell you how it went. Pronghorn and mule deer are probably my two favorite animals in North America. Just aesthetically look cool. They're kind of the trophies. I don't know if any of y'all ever played Cabela's Big Game Hunter 2004 or any of those series, but playing those video games and doing some of the Texas feeder hunting that I grew up on and I still do to this day, the dream of hunting out west, it was implanted into me with that video game. The quote-unquote real hunting where you're out spotting and stalking and driving around and glassing and doing all that. It's just a fantasy to me, right? It was, dream, the ultimate dream hunt. 3 years ago, me and my buddy, we went to Colorado for the first time, and we went the over-the-counter elk tag route and ended up with tag soup, but, got our first taste of, hey, what it's really like, having a hike in there, working with the snow, inclement weather, stuff like that we had never done before. And even with our very limited amount of hunting that we did, we learned a ton. So I knew when I would return to Colorado, I wanted to at least do one guided hunt or get with a good outfit that I would be willing to go with, year after year. I wanted to go with a guide so that I basically had a paid mentor, somebody who'd sit there and talk to me and share tips and tricks. And I know a lot of those guys will do private land hunting, but guess what? They still got to find the animals. They want to make you happy and make that money and have it keep coming in. And there's nothing wrong with that. So those are really great people to talk to and ask and get on a hunt with. So this year I decided I was going to go with a pronghorn guided hunt for my first guided hunt trip that I've ever went on my own. And then I magically drew for mule deer in the unit that we ended up hunting later in October. And so we had this whole season planned out, and it was just going to be, two really big adventures. As far as prep work, I'm fairly active. I work in industrial maintenance. Between my family, I have 3 little kids and my wife, trying to balance all that out and get my overtime. But I'm extremely ADHD. So I was like, how can I make my daily routine more intense so that I can be fit enough when I make it to Colorado? So, I had one of those Amazon special Milwaukee Pack Out backpacks, the knockoff brand. And I loaded it with as many tools as possible. And anytime I was working, I'd throw that backpack on and walk as fast as I could from station to station around my facility. And it worked out well enough. This time I wasn't quite as winded. And so that part worked out. I also spent almost every other weekend at the range, one day, and doing a bunch of practicing, hand loading, making sure I had everything good to go. So if you've been following my channel, 300 of you, thank you for subscribing. If you've been following my channel, you know that I built another rifle for this hunt, my 275 Rigby Improved. And, at first that rifle was great and it was turning out to be a really fantastic shooter. And I started running into problems with it, and I could not figure out why. I started out, I had a Diamondback Tactical on it. I had, that's a 4-16. Scopes work great. I've had it for 5 or 6 years now, and it's been perfect as far as like entry level, long range looking kind of scope. It worked great, tracked well. I had it in a Bell & Carlson stock, and then at first, all I had was just a standard mil-spec Mauser trigger that I had in there, and I polished it down to where it was good enough where I felt more than comfortable taking, 300-400 yard shots on steel with. Well, then I was looking around on the internet, and that company GRS came up that they made Mauser 98 stocks, and especially their new GRS Warg stock. It's the one that's got that really cool M-Lock forend on it. And I was like, hey, I was like, hey, that stock looks almost identical to the Gull Sniper Magnum from Battlefield Bad Company 2 and Battlefield 3. You know, I'm video gamer growing up. I love those two games, and I love that sniper rifle, and I always wanted to make me a clone, so I figured I'd hop up and get it. And between that and trying a couple of different bullets, put it in the stock. Everything fit up just nicely. I had a good dollar bill fit for free floating, and I thought it was going to do great. And then the problems started almost immediately. One of them was, and it's not a fault of GRS. They, I'm sure they have a spec and a certain bolt pattern and whatnot that they work off of. But the stock that I got, the rear end where the bolt channel was, or the back bolt shroud was, it would come in and it would just ever so slightly rub against the bottom, and it would make it kind of rough trying to push it in and close the bolt. So I had to do a little modification there, and then the cutout for the bolt knob was a little odd. Like it wouldn't quite close the rifle all the way. So I had to do some modifications to the side, just gently sanding it down just to accommodate the angle of the bolt, and turned out fine. One thing that was concerning though, when I put it into the stock, is I look at it and the inside is nothing but plastic. I'll show a picture of what the insides look like. And that was concerning because, I mean, calls itself a chassis. They call it a chassis. Best turnkey, no bedding required. But I see all that plastic in there, and there's no real bedding block or anything like that. And I was like, maybe it's underneath the plastic. Maybe it's something that I don't need to pay that much attention to. But in the stock, like I said, free floated, everything was fine. Took it out, and first couple of sessions, it was shooting okay. I was just shooting off a sandbag on the bench, and my typical practice routine when it came to Colorado, and just anytime I'm at the range in general, is we have a 100-yard paper target range, and there's 200, 300, and 400 yards. There's paper target stands, but there's also steel targets. What I would normally do with all of my rifles, at the 100 yards, I'll go and I'll shoot a 3-round group just to verify that everything's zero and good. And then at 200 yards, there's like a 6-inch gong. At 300, there's a full-size IPSC and a coyote silhouette target. And then at 400, they have 2 8-inch gongs and another coyote silhouette. Well, with this rifle, with this 25-06 Ackley improved, you know, I can quote-unquote clear that stage pretty easily. On the small gongs and the 2 coyotes, with this thing, it's a freaking laser beam. This cartridge is so flat. Well, before I put it into that GRS stock, I could do the exact same thing with the Bell & Carlson that I had on my 275 Rigby improved. And with 3 different ammo types, so I've made a 162 ELDM load, I have a 150 ELDX load, and then my kind of 270 load, as it were, or if you'd call it that, is my 140 going at 2,900 feet per second, give or take. Fastest I ever got, it was 2,950, but I did back off on the powder just to give myself a little bit of a fudge factor. So it was sitting right at 2,900 feet per second. But anyway, so at that range, with the Bell & Carlson stock on that 275 Rigby, as long as I had my dope right there on hand, it was perfect. You know, wind wasn't that much of a factor, and it would shoot great out to 400 yards. Then one day I go out there with that GRS stock on, and I go to do that little warm up, shoot 3 shots, and it's pretty dead on. And I shoot my stage, 200, 300, and 400, and it's great. Go back, set the rifle down, grab this rifle or grab whichever other one I was shooting with, and the rifle, this rifle shoots good, that rifle shoots good, whatever I was doing. Went back, grabbed the 275, put it on the bench, and I was like, okay, I don't need to worry about going and rechecking at 100. Let me go shoot at 300. Started at 300 on the Coyote Steel. Almost instantly, it was like, wait, shots hitting low. And I'm like, do I have my dope wrong? I went and checked it. It was fine. And then I went over, and like I said, there's an IPSC target right there. Held same dope, and it's shooting like 6 inches low or 8 inches low. It's kind of at the bottom of where I should be aiming at, bottom of the IPSC if I'm aiming center mass. Took it back, went over to 100, and I shot 3 to confirm it one more time. And the point of impact had moved about 3 inches low at 100 yards or 2.5 inch. It was enough where you could notice there was a difference between the first group and the second group. So I'm like, okay, maybe I bumped the scope, maybe something's a little off, and I go, turn the dial, shoot it, and it's fine. Once I adjusted the scope, I just used the reticle, went on down, and quote-unquote cleared the stage. Well, okay, that was weird. Maybe I bumped the scope, whatever. Set the gun back down, did whatever I had to do, came back, picked up the rifle again, started at 200 it shot about right on. I go to 300 and it's high, like it's 6 inches high, 8 inches high, going over the top of the Coyote. And I'm like, am I just pulling these shots or whatever? A friend of mine, Great Value Varga, was at the range with me, and he noticed that my bipod I had on there, the screws were a little long, and he was like, maybe that's making contact with the barrel. And I'm like, it could be. Took the bipod, took the mount off, and shot it, and it kind of started to behave a little bit. I'm like, okay, well, maybe I didn't hog enough of the barrel out. Maybe I need to trim these screws back. Whatever. Just for this trip, I was like, okay, I'll just take my rucksack with me and shoot prone off of that, or he gave me a really nice used tripod, and I'll shoot off of that. Anyway, head to Colorado, and beautiful drive on the way up there. I head through Dallas, went through Amarillo, and all the way up to the southern tip of Colorado. And I stopped at a range down there in Pueblo and decided, let me go ahead and just do a double check of everything that I've got. Number one rule, anytime you go on a hunt anywhere, you should at least have 2 rifles with you. Just in case one of them takes a dump and you need a backup. Well, I had brought this rifle with me, and then I had also brought that 275. And I get to the range. They gave me about an hour to use my lane that I had. And I go and I shoot my 3-shot group. 3-shot group, it printed okay. It was maybe a 1/4 of a mil high. And I adjusted it, and I'm like, okay, perfect. A little bit of change in elevation, stuff like that, sure. I grabbed this rifle and put 3 down, and it is barely just a 1/4 of an inch to the left from the old 0. And I'm like, oh, great. Perfect backup gun. This rifle, the only 2 kinds of cartridges that I had with it were my 120 grain Nosler partition loads that I had. These are going right at 3,300 feet per second or so. Not a very high BC projectile, but it's going fast enough that it really doesn't drop out to about 400 yards or so. The holdovers are very, very minimal. And the other one I had was my 110 Accubon. This one, a little slippery of a bullet, little bit better BC, and I could keep this one a little faster. This one's going about 3450. Anyway, shot both of these, and this one shoots maybe 0.2 of a mil lower than these, but they're fairly close enough that if I was, sleepy, tired, grabbed the wrong one, out to about 300, their drops are relatively similar. Obviously, this one's a little bit better, but I'm not going to be completely off the animal if I get that. Either way, hey, I know this rifle's good. I go back to my 275 Rigby Improved rifle and put it back on the bench, and I take a couple more practice shots with it. And now, all of a sudden, the rifle is shooting like 6 inches low at 100 yards. And I'm like, did I really make that big of an adjustment? Did I not double check? Well, I adjusted it and fired 3 more rounds, and it was kind of on target, a little bit better. And I'm like, okay, let me set this down, let it cool for a second. I'll shoot a couple more practice shots with this. And if you can predict the future, the 275 impact shifts again. Well, that was the most infuriating thing ever. I built that rifle for that trip, and I was thinking, oh, well, I'm gonna have to toss it in the dumpster on the way home. But I was like, you know what? Things happen. It's good enough for 100 or 200 yards. It'll be my backup rifle, and this will be my primary. So we'll fast forward. You've seen my beautiful trip up the Sangre de Cristo Mountains. One of the most gorgeous areas I've ever seen in my life. Super pretty area. Met up with the outfitters, got my tag, got my information, and spent some time with the gentleman up there with Sangre de Cristo Outfitters. They were the guys that I ended up going with. Awesome group of people. You'll never find a nicer group of guys. Perfect old school hunting camp kind of vibes. Really great gentlemen. And we talked about, what we were taking, what rifle I had. The gentleman that I was talking with, he was an old Vietnam vet. He talked a lot about his older cartridges that he loves. He loved, and one of his favorite cartridges that I would have never thought I would have heard it was the 250 3000 Savage, which super cool cartridge. I'm sure Ron Spomer and other guys do better cartridge talks on it. The first cartridge that ever broke the 3,000 feet per second range as far as a production cartridge. But that was cool. And then the guides, they start taking their bets, and they start, goading me and the other hunters that were there about who's going to shoot first and who's going to get the biggest. And I kind of laughed it off, and I was like, hey, we'll see. And then the other guy starts talking mess, and we're like, yeah, going back and forth. Oh, yeah. So they put out that bet, who's going to shoot first, who's going to get the biggest. And I'm kind of like, hey, as long as I get a shot, I'm more than ecstatic. This is awesome opportunity. We go to bed, and, all night kind of tossing and turning, ready for the first day of the season. What am I going to see out there and whatnot? Get up about 5 o'clock, make some coffee, and we start driving to the area we're going to hunt. And within pulling into the property that they had selected, all I see is the guides kind of out the doors with their binoculars and their spotting scopes. And it's like, oh yeah, there's a little group of goats. And I'm kind of thinking, oh, they're just, jerking my chain. They're trying to, they're trying to get me excited and whatnot. Well, then he's like, oh, there's a couple of bucks right there. And I'm like, all right, I got to start doing my breathing exercises, guys. I get buck fever over does, over all game animals that come out to the stand or when I'm out in public land. I'm just excited to be in the woods. I'm excited when you see animals. A lot of guides, you'll see the memes about, the hem and haw about, yeah, you can take this animal, but, you could do better, this and that. And I was kind of wondering if that's how this conversation was going to go, or how these hunts were going to go. But out of nowhere, I just hear the main guy, Travis, just say, "Oh, that's a good one." If your guide tells you, "Hey, that's a good one," it's game on. Like we're not playing games. This is a good animal to get on. And sure enough, I saw him, and he was a great looking goat. He was very jumpy. He kind of spooked a little bit. Did Speedy goat stuff, just running around and acting. He did typical Speedy goat stuff, running around, acting crazy for a minute, and then he kind of settled down and got out. Kind of got to a little position. They were kind of like, "Well, can you make the shot standing?" And I was like, I could see, looking through the scope, and I could see my own heartbeat in the reticle, just do. And I'm like going all over the place. I'm like, no, I'm gonna have to lay down for this one. Throw my pack down on the ground and get ready. And guy calls out the range, 300 yards. Put the reticle on him, and I'm steadier, but I'm still not that steady. So I'm doing my breathing exercises, just calming myself down. I'm not going to take a poor shot just because I'm antsy. And wait a few seconds. Perfect broadside. He was at the range I was given was 300 yards. And I looked in the scope. 0.68 is the drop at 300 yards for this 25-06 with the AccuBond. Oh, I forgot to mention. So yes, I decided to go with the 110 AccuBond. That drop at 300 yards was 0.68 for that density altitude. Calmed myself down and took the shot. Well, I don't know if you've ever shot an AccuBond where there's a backdrop of rocks or, kind of that real rocky terrain. Oh my gosh, when this does a clean pass through or it hits something behind it, like I've heard impacts from soft points and other big cartridges and you get that big kind of crack. This, when it hit the dirt behind the antelope, it sounded like you smacked a rock with a hammer or smacked the side of the truck with a hammer. Let the shot off, and the guide's like, "Dude, I think you missed." And I'm like, "Are you kidding me?" With the amount that I've practiced with this gun, and I've already had the other gun that wasn't want to cooperate. I got up and I was kind of about to throw the gun in the ditch. Just take me home right now, kind of deal. And then the other guy that was watching was like, "Oh no, you got him, he's down." And that head rush was like nothing I've ever felt before. I'm not a trophy hunter. I don't get that excited over, trophy animals or quote unquote big animals. But when you nail a shot like that, and that was my first ever long range or quote unquote longer range shot on an animal, I was ecstatic that I made connection and I put the animal down humanely, which is funny because I did all that time, invested into, making sure I had the right subtension on the reticle on the animal and good, breath control and whatnot. And I look up at the guy and he's like, "Bro, I'm so sorry." And I was like, What's up? He said, "Well, he's on the ground, but I was right about to tell you as you pulled the trigger that he was actually at 330. And I was like, "Wait, what?" He's like, "Yeah, but I guess it didn't matter that much at all." The difference between 300 and 330 at that density altitude was roughly a quarter mil. A little bit less than that, not quite. 0.68 versus 0.85. I guess, doing what I've always been taught, aim for a decent middle lung shot. And it dropped kind of right in that pocket and got both lungs and put the animal down quickly. The performance on it, I'm not going to show it on YouTube. I do not want any kickback of how it looks or, any gruesome details or anything like that. But this 110 AccuBond going that fast, there's people that talk about getting too much bullet, blood trail bullet. I know there's some podcasters and whatnot that aren't really into the bonded or the controlled expansion bullets, but this AccuBond, this really tough bullet in the right place, even though it did a complete pass through, it still expanded. It expanded really well. Entry wound is right at the caliber of, right at 25 caliber, it kind of fit nicely. The opposite end, it looked like a 45 caliber bullet coming out of it, but it did expand and dumped its energy and ended up with a really beautiful antelope at the end of it. So we got him back, and we took all my trophy photos and all the cool kid stuff that I needed to post all over Facebook and YouTube. But great group of guys. They were so hospitable. They were really cool dudes, and I will be back with them within the next year or two. I learned a hell of a lot, even in just that short hunt. Like I said, the season started that Saturday morning, the beginning of October, and my antelope was on the ground by maybe 6:30, 7 o'clock. It was definitely an early morning and a quick season, but it was fantastic to get on one. That group of gentlemen, they were so good with, making sure they helped me cape out my animal. They were showing me how to cut around it if I ever did a whitetail over here or did another animal or something like that. Fantastic service, but even more so, fantastic group of human beings, really cool guys. And then, shortly after that, I was back on my way to Texas, get home and headed back home so I can alleviate the wife and, give her a break from the munchkins early and whatnot. So that was my story, the 110 AccuBond. This is something that I kind of developed for, mule deer, really, really close range elk. Same thing with this 120 partition. This would definitely be a closer range elk load or mule deer load. Thought this projectile, this 110 AccuBond, was going to be a little too tough for that pronghorn, or I did not know or what the results were going to be shooting such a tough bullet at a thin skin kind of little animal, but did the job. So I guess that's where they say, speed kills, and that's why I'm in love with this rifle. If you want to hear what happened with the 275 rig being improved, stay tuned. We'll talk about my second Colorado trip. And I appreciate all of you who've subscribed. I've seen 390 so far. All you really loved my 25-06 Ackley improved video, and please like, share, and subscribe. What is your dream hunt? What is the animal that it's got to either scratch off that bucket list, or if a video game has inspired you to do something like go hunting or do whatever, what was it? Let me know down in the comments. Thank you very much, everyone. Y'all have a good one. Goodbye.